Let's get to Eddie Yeranian. Eddie is live. He's in Cairo, Egypt. Eddie Yeranian, a veteran CBS radio correspondent and a veteran of The Voice of America. Eddie, great to have you.
Thank you, John. Happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, happy Thanksgiving, Ed. Hey, when are you coming back to the States?
I wish I could say for Christmas, but I don't think it's going to happen this year.
Well, when you come, look me up. We'll have dinner no matter where you are, all right? Because I haven't seen you in a while, so that'd be good. Ed, let's get to the Israeli situation. Netanyahu indicted? It's incredible what has happened to him. I mean, how does he survive? What happens?
I think he's going to hang in there as long as possible. I don't know if the judicial system, the Israeli judicial system, can actually dislodge him. He's said he's going to stay in place, heading the caretaker government, and at the same time respond to charges that have been brought against him. It's not 100% certain that those charges will actually he will be he'll be prosecuted, but that he'll be convicted. But I don't think there's any precedent for this, and I don't think anyone is going to force him to give up the leadership of the caretaker government. So I think for the moment, and I think this could last until new elections in April, this stalemate could continue.
Can he win?
It's looking bad, but then if you listen to the American media, the mainstream media, everything that's happened in the House impeachment procedure makes President Trump look bad too. And I've listened to the same information, and I think he's got a good hand. So tough to believe what you see in the media sometimes.
What has the reaction been of the Middle Eastern press, especially in Egypt, with their relationship with Israel and Netanyahu, with kind of arm's length at times? What has been the reaction there in Egypt?
Egypt has been remarkably quiet about it. They've covered the subject. I think Egyptians are fairly aware of what's going on. There's been no congratulatory celebration, as you often see with other leaders like Turkish President Erdogan, since Egypt doesn't like Turkey, the Turkish president, or the leader of Qatar. You see a lot of bad press for those two people, but they've been remarkably kind to Prime Minister Netanyahu. You'd expect otherwise, but that's been the case.
That's kind of what I thought. I just wanted to confirm that. How have the Egyptians reacted to Erdogan's visit to the U.S. and the president's position? What has been Egypt's position on that, Eddie Yeranian?
Well, Egypt and Syria were united in what was called the United Arab Republic under Nasser for about 3 years, back in the late 50s and early 60s. So there's a soft spot for Syria. The Egyptian government has been supporting the Assad government, so they've been fairly supportive of the fact that President Trump has decided to pull out of Syria, and hoping, of course, that the Syrian government would control the border with Turkey rather than the Turkish forces and their allies coming into Syria. So they really don't have any troops up there. I think people have asked them to send troops in recent years, but Egypt has stayed away from getting involved in Syria or Yemen, as a matter of fact. And as for Erdogan, he got bad press for his visit to the U.S., as he gets bad press in the Egyptian media for everything he does. And if you watch the Turkish media, they give President Sisi of Egypt bad press for everything too. So it's fairly mutual.
John Fredericks Radio Network. We're chatting with Eddie Yeranian. He's our man in the Middle East. Been with us for 8 years since I've been on the air. Eddie is live in Cairo, Egypt. Veteran reporter, CBS News, and the Voice of America. The general reaction to this Ukrainian, I don't know what you want to call it, inquiry on impeachment with the president and this potential quid pro quo. When you talk to your colleagues and they're looking at this and they're looking at the public hearings, and I understand it's been pretty well broadcast throughout the Middle East, what is their reaction?
Well, I watched it. I believe that the one name that we didn't hear at all, which should have been brought up by someone, is George Soros. No one mentioned his name. No one mentioned the fact he's been very active in the Ukraine and that he's one of the parties that's been involved in supporting one side against the other. No one has mentioned that some of these U.S. officials have ties to him. And you have to ask yourself what's going on when they don't have the courage, the legislators on the committee don't have the courage. That's my takeaway. And if they don't mention his name, impartial they are, the press, in covering this subject as well. So was active in Egypt, as I said, Syria. You have the courage to mention it.
Well, here, nobody believe it's quite disruptive to the way things have been always, the way we've gone forward. And so as these hearings played out, you saw whiny, crybaby, washed up current or ex-U.S. diplomats come on and short affairs, come on and say, well, I told Pompeo I'd take the job, but only if we did my policy in Ukraine, and if we don't, I'm going to quit. Whatever your policy is, it's the policy of the president because he got elected. Nobody elected Ambassador Taylor to do anything, right? He serves at the pleasure of the president. He should have fired her. He should have canned her the first day, not waited 30 months. You know, these are really the issues that are going on here that, I mean, I would think that it would be hard for authoritarian governments around the Middle East to really understand how we have a government that operates unilaterally from the direction of the administration on foreign policy, right?
Well, I've been watching the U.S. government behave in various places in the Middle East, and at a number of junctures, they've done the opposite of what President Trump announced as his policy. So you can see Egypt, in Libya, in Syria, and as you see this, you have to ask yourself why the Americans appointed, like Tillerson, the former secretary, from what the president said was his policy in the Gulf,
right?
And whether you like it or not, but yes, you have to ask yourself where these bureaucrats are coming from that they think they can make U.S. policy against the wishes and policies of the president.
Well, they've been certainly doing it for years, and part of the problem is personnel's policy, and the president has done a piss-poor job in adequately staffing the State Department officials that are political. What they've done the second day they were there is gotten rid of all of the. I argue with my Trump-based friends who say they're evil people appointed to the State Department in some senior position with authority. And I was appointed there by Trump because I have policy. And Trump loses in 2020, and the new president, Elizabeth Warren, and they don't fire me, and I'm still there. I'm likely going to go forward. I'm not an evil person. I'm likely going to go forward every way that I can in order to advance Trump's policies, not hers, because that's what I believe in. Doesn't make me evil. It's their fault for letting me stay there. Does that make sense?
Yes, it has nothing to do with being evil. There, but for the grace of God, go I. I could be a globalist myself. I've lived abroad for 37 years. I lived in France before coming to the Middle East 32 years ago, but I'm not a globalist. And I think the president has set the tone for an America versus the global, a nationalist policy versus a globalist policy. And the majority of the American people, or at least the Electoral College, decided that his policy was going to be the policy that would prevail.
Exactly.
So,
no, right. Go ahead. You're totally correct.
Yes.
You're totally
Yes,
correct.
I mean, when people have decided they want a nationalist policy, an America First policy, that is the policy that should be sponsored or supported by the bureaucrats, because the president has said that's his policy. He was elected to do that, and it should be going in that direction, not have bureaucrats laying traps every time that he's tried to do something.
Well, that's what we've had, and I'm a one-man gang in trying to explain to our listeners that the Trump administration and those in PPO in the White House are culpable for this. And a lot of people don't like that. They want me to say it's deep state, it's not our fault. Well, it is our fault because we control a lot of these appointments. Personnel is policy. They've not done a good job. And my mission in continuing to point this out, Edward, is that when Trump gets reelected again in 2020, if they don't fix this, you're going to get the exact same result, right? If you go down the same path, guess what? You end up in the same place. So I'm hoping that the Trump administration understands personnel is policy. They find the right people. They find people that actually believe in his agenda, and they put them in positions of influence and authority. And if they don't do that, they're going to end up in the same position. And to me, what is most troublesome is they hire McMaster, doesn't believe in any of the president's policies, General McMaster. McMaster hires Fiona Hill, doesn't believe in any of the president's policies. The president signs off on Fiona Hill. The president hired McMaster. I used to call him McMaster of disguise. That's strike two. Pompeo hires Taylor, who says, I don't agree with America First. The only way I serve is if this is our policy in Ukraine or I'll quit. Pompeo hires him anyway. And then, what the hell do you expect? What result could you possibly expect other than what you have with that going on? That's the alarm bell that I keep ringing that nobody wants to hear. Hopefully you and I can solve that. Edward, I'm out of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving, Eddie Yeranian. John Fredericks Radio Network.